We as people are people of seasons, right? Think about for how long humanity has been introduced to or influenced by winter, summer, spring, and fall. Think about how that has changed the way of life and what it is that we eat and who we are and how we behave and interact with one another. But with modern technology, seasons from the earth have gone back further and further into our distant memory. Right now, it's very easy for us to get any fruit that we desire any time of the year in just about every grocery store in the country. So we've seen this shift from how we understand seasons outside to how we understand seasons inside. Think about when you go to your local retail store, they often have a section marked seasonal. And it's the things you're supposed to buy during that season, right? Not only that, but if you look at the calendar, we have just introduced a brand new season or entered into a brand new season that was kicked off yesterday with what day was it? Black Friday. Thanksgiving was 2 days ago. Black Friday was yesterday, and it's a season that goes all the way till December 25. And what is this season called? Buy things season, right? That's what we're supposed to do. And while this is part of our culture and part of who we are, what we have to acknowledge is the season of buy things is a recently invented season in human history. It is only because of the supply chains and mass consumption and all of these different retail stores that we've been introduced to this season that we participate in every year. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with the season. We just have to acknowledge that it is a new season. And when we participate in the season of buy things, we are doing something new in human history, right? Well, last week we talked about our plan for the next 3 years, which is to follow the Lectionary and also the Liturgical Calendar. And the Liturgical Calendar is the Christian calendar that is made up of these seasons, and these seasons run in this order in these days. Now, we are right now in the first weekend of Advent. And Advent is the first season of the Christian calendar. Now, if you've heard the word Advent before, it's often in connection with the calendar, which you open up one day at a time. And this is a tradition that goes back all the way to the 5th century. So if you participate in Advent, you are participating in a season that has been going on for 1,500 years. Now, of course, the season of buy things has seen the Advent calendar and thought to themselves, we can make some money on this. And so they've introduced all sorts of ways for you to buy these different Advent calendars. And what's important for us to acknowledge is that when we practice Advent or acknowledge or participate in the season of Advent, we are tapping into something much deeper. As one of my mentors, Kim Krogstad, once told me, she said, I like to think of the season of Advent as kind of the Pepto-Bismol to the Christmas season. To say, hey, we hear this Christmas season today, which is you are here to buy things and buy as much as possible, and your love is measured by the amount of presents you can buy for your loved ones around that tree. That's what this is all about. Advent comes crashing in and reminds us something very important every year. We do not exist to buy things. That's not why God created us. And while it's okay to buy things, it's not the summit of our human achievement if we can buy as many things as possible, right? So, with that in mind, we have to ask the question, what is Advent? Because there's all of these different seasons, and Christians are very familiar with the season of Christmas. It's a celebration of Christ's birth. But the season before it that starts the Christian year is the season of Advent. And the whole season is this anticipation of something great on the horizon. Not only that, but Advent is looked at as more of a somber season where you acknowledge the reality of what we endure today. In other words, during the season of Advent, we voice our suffering and also validate our hope. It is a season of anticipation that acknowledges that we have come into this new year with some pain, with some baggage, with some heartache. And we voice all of those hardships that we have faced. And at the same time we say, but maybe something better is on the horizon. So today's service is the first service of the Advent season, and it's an invitation for all of you to reflect and participate in Advent, to both voice your own suffering and also to validate your own hope. To start this service, I have to tell you about a tradition that happens here at Paradox. Every year, my kids celebrate a birthday in December. My son Bodie was born on December 12. My daughter Maya was born on December 24. And we celebrate their birthdays here at the church by me writing a letter explaining to them what the Christmas season is. And when we started thinking about how we were going to practice Advent, the first thing that came to mind was these letters, because it's this reality of what we face buttressed against the hope that we hold so tightly to. And while you have heard me read letters to my own kids for years now, we thought it would be worthwhile to invite other parents to enter into the Advent season and write letters to their own kids. So we have invited Ranjini and Newton, as well as Maddie and Jordan, to write letters to their kids that embody the Advent season. And so I'd like to invite up Ranjini and Newton at this time. One of my favorite authors is a man named John Green, and he wrote a novel just a few years ago called Turtles All the Way Down. And there's a scene in this book that, in my opinion, encapsulates the Advent season perfectly. I'm going to actually read from that book and have a little bit of a reading here and bring you into that story. I'm just going to give you a little bit of context so you can understand what's going on. The main character in this book is Asa Holmes, and the book is written from her perspective. This is a work of fiction. She has sort of met and sort of fallen in love with this guy named Davis Pickett, and the thing that they have in common is they have both lost a parent. They are both teenagers. Asa lost her father a few years ago, as did Davis. He lost his mother a few years ago as well. Now, the way that Asa remembers her father is that she has his phone and she has the password and she scrolls through all of his pictures because she can see life from his perspective. So she shared this with Davis at this point and asked Davis, how is it that you remember your mother when you're feeling lonely for her? And they go out for a walk on an abandoned golf course, and this is the scene that unfolds, and this happens at night. We read, "We kept walking until we reached one of the oblong sand bunkers of the golf course. Davis lay down inside of it, his head resting on its grassy lip. I lay down next to him, our jackets touching without our skin touching. Davis pointed up at the sky and said, 'So the light pollution is terrible, but the brightest star you see, there, see it?' I nodded. 'That's not a star, Asa. That's Jupiter. But Jupiter is like, depending on orbits and stuff, between 360 and 670 million miles away. Right now, Jupiter is around 500 million miles away, which is around 45 light minutes. You know what light time is?' 'Kinda,' I said. 'It means,' Davis said, 'if we were traveling at the speed of light, it would take us 45 minutes to get from Earth to Jupiter right now. So the Jupiter we're seeing is actually Jupiter 45 minutes ago. But like just above the trees, there, those 5 stars that kind of look like a crooked W?' 'Yeah,' I said. Davis continued, 'Right, that's Cassiopeia. And the crazy thing is, the star on the top, Keph, it's 55 light years away. Then there's Shidar, which is 230 light years away, and then Navi, which is 550 light years away. It's not only that we aren't close to these stars, they aren't close to one another. For all we know, Navi blew up 500 years ago.' 'Wow,' I said. 'So you're looking at the past?' 'Yeah, exactly.' I felt Davis fumbling for something, his phone maybe, and then glanced down and realized he was trying to hold my hand. 'So you see Saturn up there?' He told me how you can tell the difference between a planet and a star and where different constellations were. And he told me that our galaxy was a big spiral and that a lot of galaxies were. Every star we see right now, Asa, is in that spiral. It's huge.' 'Does our spiral have a center?' 'Yeah,' he said. 'Yeah, the whole galaxy is rotating around this supermassive black hole, but very slowly. I mean, it takes our solar system like 225 million Earth years to orbit the galaxy.' After some time, we went to Davis's bedroom. He knelt down to show me how his telescope worked. He plugged some coordinates into a remote control, and the telescope moved itself. When it stopped, Davis stooped to look through the lens, then cleared the way for me. I looked inside, and he said, 'That's the star Tau Ceti,' he said. The way the telescope was zoomed in, I couldn't see anything but darkness and one jittering disk of white light. 12 light years away, similar to our sun, but a little smaller. 2 of its planets actually might be habitable, probably not, but maybe. That star, Tau Ceti, is my favorite star. I didn't know what I was supposed to be seeing. It was just a circle like any other. But then Davis explained, I like to look at this star and think about how the sun's light looks to someone in Tau Ceti's solar system. Right now, someone on Tau Ceti is seeing our light from 12 years ago. In the light that they're seeing, my mom still has 3 years left to live. This house has just been built, and mom and dad are always fighting about the layout of the kitchen. In the light they see, you and I are just kids. We've got the best and the worst of it in front of us. Well, Davis, we still have the best and the worst of it in front of us, I said. I hope not, Davis said. I sure as hell hope the worst is behind me. I pulled away from Tau Ceti's 12-year-old light and looked up at Davis. I took his hand, and part of me wanted to tell him that I loved him, but I wasn't sure if I really did. Our hearts were broken in the same places. That's something like love, but maybe not quite the thing itself. It sucked having a dead person in your family, and I knew that what he meant about seeing solace in the old light. 3 years from now, I know he'd find a different favorite star, one with older light to gaze upon. And when time caught up with that star, he'd love a farther star and a farther star. Because you can't let the light catch up with the present, otherwise you'd forget. That's why I liked looking at my dad's pictures. It was the same thing, really. Photographs are just light and time. Oh man, I have to tell you, when I read that line from that book about 3 years from now, I knew he'd have to find a different favorite star. It wrecked me. Not only that, but what took me by surprise was just this morning, as I was reading this, I got choked up and I had a hard time reading it in front of all of you. Because there's something so very real and scientific and human about all of this. After all, if you were to be on the surface of Tau Ceti or in that vicinity, you would still see everything as real and as perfect as it was 12 years ago. And while that's a difficult concept to kind of wrap our minds around, there is some poetry inherent in the way that light bends and shapes and forms the way that we experience this existence. This poetry was tapped into by one of my favorite singer-songwriters, a man named Ryan O'Neal, who goes under the moniker Sleeping at Last. The first song I ever heard from this man was a song called Saturn, and the poetry of what is real just takes my breath away every time I hear it. He writes, "You taught me the courage of stars before you left, how light carries on endlessly even after death. With shortness of breath, you explained the infinite, and how rare and beautiful it is to even exist." There is something about the life that we live, how even after our death, there will be this light that travels endlessly on from the point of our earth forever and ever and ever into the universe, at the very least of what this existence is. And when I think about the stars and what they represent and what they tell us about all of the cosmos and how they've participated in this existence with us, there is this line from the Psalms that I keep coming back to that just always brings me some form of comfort. The psalmist writes, "God determines the number of stars, and God gives to all of them their names." And so here we are on this tiny little planet in this tiny little speck in a solar system that is barely readable when you look at all of the Milky Way. And yet here we are living our lives and understanding that we also encounter suffering and pain and heartache. I mean, just reading all that people had gone through was really difficult when we talk about the absence of God. And so a question we have to ask ourselves every Advent season is, what suffering are you carrying with you today? Because it's real, and yes, it hurts. And anytime somebody rushes you into the Christmas season and says, like, isn't God good all the time? It's okay in Advent to say, no, it's not always good. No, there is heartache, and that heartache is real. Conversely, though, Advent at its heart is a paradox. Because you have to ask yourself also the question, what hope are you holding on to when you think about the future? And hearing the letters from Ranjini and Newton and Maddie and Jordan to their kids about what they hope for, what their future will be, is deeply moving and just as much a part of the Advent experience. So tonight, when you look up at the stars, and yes, we have blocked them out with all of our light pollution, I want to invite you to think about what the Advent season means to you. Who is it that you are grieving? What is it that you are grieving? What suffering are you carrying with you? Because I have to tell you that when I think about this Advent season, I want you to know that today I'm grieving the loss of all 4 of my grandparents. It's been years since they've passed away, and yet I still miss them. I watch my parents interact with my kids, and it just melts my heart. And at the same time, there is this sadness because I remember how much I loved running into my grandma's house in Minnesota, how much I loved every Monday morning with my grandma here in Redlands. And I will never, ever forget the love that all of my grandparents embodied and gave so generously to me. So even though it is the Christmas season, and even though we're looking forward to things, I am still here grieving the loss of all 4 of my grandparents. And yet I know it's not the end of the story. And if someone were to ask me, what is it that I actually hope for when it comes to losing grandparents, I think that more than anything, I'm hoping that just in some way, shape, or form, that I will feel close to them again one day. That I will feel their presence, that I will be able to see them in some form or another in the future, and that hope in Advent is just as real as well. And so today, when I ask you what it is that you are holding, that you are grieving, and what it is that you are holding on to for hope, may you understand that in all of this season of Advent, that these things are real and worth spending time with. All of us here are enduring suffering and also clinging on to some form of hope. And all I can say in response to that is, thank God we have each other. Amen. Thank you that we have each other who are willing to share what it is that is burdening our heart and also buoying our heart. Thank God that we have each other to encourage one another and also to suffer alongside one another. Amen. Thank God for these seasons where we don't have to say it's all happy all the time, but instead can say, you know what's really bothering me? And no one tries to correct you or tries to make you feel like it's okay because you know it's not okay. May we be a community of Advent. May we be a community who both suffers together and also hopes together. And may you, during this season, trust both the goodness and the reality of all that you experience. And may you find that it is truly rare and beautiful to even exist.